Welcome to Brewed and Briefed, a short form audio briefing from Coffee in the Desert and Rihla Research and Advisory. We break down the week's most important geopolitical and technology developments shaping the Middle East and beyond, and the time it takes to finish your first cup of coffee. Hi, I'm Jesse Marks, founder and CEO of Rihla Research and Advisory, and the author of Coffee in the Desert. Today, we're breaking down one of the biggest shifts in U.S. Syria policy in more than a decade, and what it could mean for Syria's economy, for regional recovery, and most importantly, for Syrians who are ready to return and rebuild their lives. Let's dig in. On May 23rd, the OFAC, the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets and Control, issued General License 25. This license redefines what's legally allowed across Syria. Just weeks earlier, President Trump stood in Riyadh and promised to, quote, end the era of paralysis in U.S. sanctions policy towards Syria. GL25 is a regulatory follow through. It's the most sweeping easing of sanctions on Syria we have seen in over a decade. The license authorizes nearly all transactions previously blocked under the Syria sanctions regulations. It applies nationwide, and it allows the U.S. government to suspend Caesar Act enforcement for 180 days, a move designed to finally give Syria's post-Assad institutions the room to recover without the threat of immediate U.S. penalties. GL25 reflects a new and economic political reality for Syria. The license updates the U.S. government's definition of the Syrian government to refer to the administration of the new president, Ahmed al-Shara. This is an important signal that Assad is no longer in power, and one of the most significant boosts to Syria's international legitimacy since the war ended. By allowing U.S. persons to engage with Syrian state entities under new leadership, Washington is signaling support not just for Syria's reconstruction, but for Syria's broader attempt to turn the page on its future. It's a sign that Syria may be entering a better chapter and that the United States may be finally prepared to support Syrian ambitions to rebuild a better country and ultimately a better life. The most immediate effect of GL25 is the lifting of long-standing sanctions on Syria's core financial institutions. For over a decade, banks like the Central Bank of Syria and the Commercial Bank of Syria were effectively cut off from the global financial system. This means no access to hard currency, no international credit, no legitimate donor funding. GL25 creates a pathway to change that. For the first time since the early years of the war, U.S. persons can now legally engage with Syria's banking institutions. That opens up a path, albeit a narrow and a cautious one, for financial normalization. It's a chance to reverse Syria's grinding liquidity crisis. For years, the formal banking channels have been frozen, and Syrians were forced to rely on informal transfers and cash workarounds like the Hawala system just to survive. But now, with legal routes for payroll, payments, and lending back on the table, the public and private sectors can soon begin to operate through law, not circumvention. This creates a new window for international donations and reparations and support from Syrian diaspora and international investment into Syrian civil society, Syrian NGOs, and aid agencies who are responding to the ongoing humanitarian emergency across Syria. In parallel, Syria's new government is attempting to reassert monetary credibility, including shifting the production of new currency away from Russia toward arrangements with Germany and the UAE. If successful, this marks a symbolic and practical break with its past. GL25 scope is quite broad. It applies not only to Syria-specific sanctions, but also to a web of restrictions tied to weapons proliferation, terrorist financing, and Iranian financial activity. It covers dozens of previously restricted institutions that are essential for public salaries, liquidity, and service delivery. In practical terms, this means money can finally move. Donors can use banks. Contractors can be paid without resorting to Hawala systems. The private sector regains access to credit and financial tools, and most critically, it gives Syrians a framework for recovery that runs through legality and institutions and no longer relying fully on black markets and workaround economies. The significance isn't just economic. At the end of the day, it is human. It opens the door even slightly for Syrians displaced to consider returning and rebuilding their lives. It offers families hope that they might be able to invest, work, send their kids to school in a country that is beginning to function again. This is a window. It is not a guarantee, but it's a signal that Syrians might be able to shape their future, not just survive it. Of course, the license does have its limits. It does not unfreeze assets blocked before May 22nd. It does not authorize engagement with anyone on the SDN list unless they appear under the new annex of names. It prohibits transactions involving Russia, Iran, or North Korea across a range of goods, financing, services, and technology. It also doesn't override other U.S. laws, including those tied to arms exports, sensitive technologies. Compliance still remains an important matter. Documentation, due diligence, and clear record keeping will be essential for anyone seeking to do any form of business in Syria moving forward. In the end, GL25 doesn't solve Syria's economic crisis, but it does represent a very different U.S. approach, one that tests whether conditional engagement can do more for Syrians than indefinite isolation ever did. It gives the Syrian caretaker government a narrow but real opportunity to stabilize its institutions and prove to the international community it is committed to the path of reform. It also gives the private sector, donors, and humanitarian actors a legal way to re engage and to be able to re access finances from beyond Syria. And it gives millions of Syrians a sliver of hope that return and recovery are once again possible. Ultimately, this is a test. The 180-day Caesar Act suspension is only temporary. Congress will ultimately decide whether to make this a permanent reality. But the message is clear that the U.S. is watching to see what Syria's new chapter looks like, and whether Syrians are finally given the chance to rebuild a future worth staying for. In the end, this has been a moment that millions of people have been waiting for over a decade. And for that reason alone, it is a point to be celebrated. That's it for this episode of Brewed and Briefed. I'm Jesse Marks. If this helped you make sense of what's unfolding in Syria, please subscribe to Coffee in the Desert, reach out to us at Rihla Advisory, and stay tuned as this story and Syria's future continues to unfold.